I'm so glad I can't see that like a mirror. Be like, look at all those wrinkles. You know? Like an old miner. Happy Monday. All right, are you ready? The spec truck, the trophy truck, the race truck, dude. Let's see if it looks different. Last episode was our first episode. This is our second installment. Tatanka XL is over there welding some stuff for Evelyn. So if you hear miscellaneous Tatanka noises, you know, how come, boom, get this, stuff like that, know that there's a tall, drawn out, handsome man over there doing stuff with the welder. Okay, I said what I said. This was another one of those things. The way that my mind works is, unless I've done something all the way through, and there is a process that I've followed all the way through with everything in my life, then the foreign stuff, the unknown things, the things I don't have experience with are very uncomfortable and overwhelming. That is how it goes. Once I do something one time, at least just one time, it turns into something where it's comfortable, it's familiar, and it's something we can make more efficient and excel at. And this, you know, even at the rate, like, we've never put together a complete race vehicle, right? We've done pre-runners, we've rehabbed the shit out of a bunch of different vehicles, but putting together a race vehicle has these other challenges of like really thinking, and this is stuff, go back to the last episode, listen to me again, because I know I don't want to be a broken record any more than I already am. But putting things in the right place, thinking about stuff for serviceability, thinking about things for simplicity, but still getting optimal design out of things with simplicity. That doesn't just mean tab here, bolt there. No, like, make it clean, make it nice, design it. Like if you had a high-end, like it's like an F1 car or something, and there's still design put into stuff. It's not just basic because it's a race vehicle. So taking all that into consideration and then applying it to essentially finishing the Everson chassis all the way into a complete vehicle minus plumbing and wiring it was overwhelming. That's what I was getting at. And you know, like, Kevin and Chris brought down all these boxes, and it's like, hey, do you think you can just finish the whole thing? And of course, yes, I can. I know I can. But that's not to say that I'm extremely uncomfortable thinking about, well, how are we going to make sure, because it's not my uncomfortability about myself not being able to do it. It's about making sure I do it right and making sure that I do it at the level of what needs to be done for also Tatanka will whistle. So it's just a noise he makes with his mouth. He doesn't know he's doing it. But it's about making sure that I do it optimally for the application, because it's a spec truck. It's something where it's competing. It's got other competition, and we need to get a leg up as much as we can. I can't afford to make mistakes that would compromise it not being competitive in its class. Things that are done right now: AGM jacks, root pass, pressure relief valve, intake panel work, passenger DPS mount, fill cap for the AGM jack fluid container back there, headers, exhaust. That's probably a pretty wholesome amount of stuff we can cover right now. That's the stuff where we're at, and then I'm going to kind of get into where we're going next. This thing is moving quickly. Colin and I are on this thing full time. That means that there's consistent big progress every single week. It's 100 hours a week on this thing. So just think about that minimum. Something that's really important with a spec truck. Spec truck being a sealed motor. So those valve covers don't come off. That is a 525 LS3 GM Performance. Just you buy that, you put that in. It has to be tagged, it's sealed, and it is what you get. So your power is, you only make more power or less power based off of induction and exhaust. The header program, we are working with Ben Walker, Walker Industries. He is our little ace up our sleeve with information and technology and research that we don't have. The biggest thing, something that I've never strived away from doing, is taking input. If there's something foreign to me or I don't know, then I will find the right people to educate me in doing so. The header one almost contradicts that, because on Keith Smith's 6100, I botched the headers. I did these big badass headers, and I did them more for design and style and much less for function and scavenging and power. And I actually did the firing order wrong, and it was a failure on my end. It was something I will remember, and so I was going to make sure that didn't happen again. And that's sometimes, like I always say, I learn things the hard way. It's my whole life. It's not just with building things, it's everything in my life. I learn the hard way, and I fucking learn, and then I move on. So this is that same program here where we wanted to make sure we took the right steps to get the most amount of power. Ben is building this program, all of the performance we want out of this motor. We want to get low-end, fast torque delivery, not just high-end stuff. It's easy to make these things do big flow and get high top end, but getting that low-end oomph is what we're striving for. And so we are working off a special recipe of diameter, of length, merge, in between the merges, that length, and then exit. All that is a secret recipe. So a lot of that information Ben has helped us with, and Ben, if you do see this, thank you so much for working with me and working with Kevin and Chris and I, and just sharing your wealth of knowledge. That's key stuff. And moving forward with this thing, we're not really going to get into the details about lengths or primary sizes or any of that. That's kind of specific for this vehicle, and it could be something that's a competitive edge. And like I said, with a lot of this stuff on here, I don't want to cover too much of that. If that's something that is going to give us gains in the long run, then it needs to stay that way and not be that way for other people. This is a big investment for multiple people. So on that note, I said I was going to have a special person come in for headers. That is a big opportunity. I see things like this as an opportunity. I see every project as an opportunity. Every project is a gift. The biggest thing for me in my life, and I only speak for myself, but it's being grateful for these things, and being grateful for opportunities that we have, and the fact that I can wake up every day and this is what I can come to work and do. And that is a blessing to me. It is a blessing to have creative control and let my imagination and sense of design dictate every single thing I do with my hands every day, and with the guys and what they do. And so the same opportunity for someone to come in and be able to do headers, it needs to be taken like that. And it's not just a job. It's not for just showing up and whenever, and that's a burden to me. And so I was going to have a guy come in, and it just wasn't working with our routine. We get in here early, and we bomb on stuff, and we shred on stuff every day, and that's how it goes, and that's what makes us who we are as a team here. So we got a little bit started, and then I put Colin on this thing. We used the ICE header kit, which is like these orange things that are kind of like Lego pieces. I can show you. I've never used them. I've always been like a hard ass. I don't need those. I'm just gonna, why would you need those? That's cheating. No, those things are amazing. They are extremely good for figuring out your routing, not burning a bunch of different material, knowing what you need to order, minimizing your weld areas, making all your, you can find design in where all your welds go, so they all can be symmetrical, or they can all be hitting on the same planes of the headers. There's so many wins you get from those. It's incredible. So if you guys haven't looked into those are Ice Engine Works header build kits. I think they're hiding out somewhere here. All right, just as it looks, this is a complete kit. These are Kevin's. I don't think I would have ever purchased these until I saw how efficient they were. Colin's never done a set of headers. Now, that doesn't scare me because I know what Colin is capable of. I know what we needed. We needed exact, these are complete equal length headers. They are in perfect firing order. So we needed to have our primary, our secondary, and our tertiaries all exact lengths, and specific lengths at that. So this allows us to really like figure out and pre-run what we want to do. I'm sure you guys already kind of figured out what's going on here. So there's indicators on here, you know, where you can move this stuff around, and you can literally build out your entire unit like this and pre-run your whole design and shape. And there's enough here where you can do, you know, a full set. So we were just doing pairs, you know, like two banks at a time on each side. And this will not only tell you, you know, like the one thing I don't like that I see in header design sometimes, and it's just, it is what it is, everybody does stuff differently, is I don't like when there's little, like, have you ever seen like an earthworm where they have a little collar, like a little ring on them? When people have to add just a sliver of a straight piece because they couldn't figure out where to maximize the bend and minimize 2 sections of welding, I think that's a design flaw. So this stuff really lets you maximize, you know, where you need to go, and then also go to a point where you're not having to add little pieces. You can kind of take another U-bend and dive that one in where it minimizes all your welding too. So you're not having to weld extra areas. One other thing to note on this is the sides are not symmetrical. Like where the first set of merge collectors land, that's a symmetrical hit. But everything from the, you know, from that portion inboard to the block, that's got to be pertaining to the packaging, especially just because for given reasons on the the driver's side with the foot controls, it's just a little different. And also the layout, like the way the firing order on the driver's side versus the passenger side. Passenger side's more of a traditional 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of thing where they can all kind of go in nicely. That whole side comes out as one piece. This is all one header that comes out, and it fits out through our spot. But we just wanted to be considerate about like not making things too tight to the sheet metal, having them kind of float in the middle of that void so there's cooling going on, and you're not saturating the engine, you're not saturating the foot box, and you're not smoking the headers either. So those are things to think about. This really also just shows our routing, right? So typical kind of thing you want to do is put your tire and wheel on there, bump it up, lock it, make sure everything clears, and then build to that. And that's what you got here. So they're spaced off enough to not just burn out on all the chassis, but they're also spaced back enough to not burn out on the tire and, you know, crash into that thing. So you can see the links are custom. It's almost like a long tube tri-Y, and they collect down here. And then we ran with the plain, this chassis tube under here that goes from the A pillar to the top of the pivots or the B pillar here. That's on the same plane as our tubing here. So this is our main exhaust after it collects. All of the stainless on here is all purge welded, so that means that it's blocked off, and then there's argon being pumped in from the backside of this thing to enable like a nice clean weld, full pin style, not just on the top surface here, but on the underside. So the under, like if you looked inside of any of this stuff, it would be like a nice weld too. It kind of goes through all the way, and it shields it on both sides. Something I had on our notes for like stuff to look forward to, or you know, work we're going to start on, is we're developing a muffler here that is like, if you're familiar with like a Yoshi pipe on a dirt bike, we're developing a muffler that's like a Yoshi muffler for high performance trucks and trophy trucks. So it's going to be kind of an elongated shape, machined ends on both sides, and then the back will have like a 8 or a 12 point rotational clocking where you kind of weld your exit, or you weld wherever that thing keeps going, and you can clock that per side, you know, so you can adjust it. It doesn't have to weld to the muffler. So that's kind of our concept with that. I don't, like, as far as the exits go on this thing, this is your like back of cab, bedside sandwich mount here. It can either dive through here and just go down, or we can keep running. I don't know what we're gonna do yet. The muffler development, I don't know if those will be like a manufactured item. They probably will be like a specialty item for just vehicles that are done under our roof here. But that's something to look forward to. So Matt's gonna help us with that thing. Let's maybe move into the intake. Okay, intake panel work. Let's go look at that. Oh, actually, we can do that, and we can do the AGM jacks. Now, if you see them, those big old chingaderas are your AGM jacks. Those are, don't hold me to it because I'm not gonna say that word, but they're 34, 36 inch AGM Dakar jacks. So this guy, oh, I need to get the blow job going under there. But we'll at least look at, like, there's only a certain place those will fit in the car. There is not a lot of real estate. They wouldn't work on the outside, and we really wanted to try to get some leverage on these things instead of just like almost that one-to-one of them being on the outside by the B-pillar here. So lots of wins as far as design with these things. We really wanted to tie them in, like there needs to be some space. If I get this seat where it's supposed to go here, you can see things do get pretty tight here. And what happens, especially since we're on the highest setting, if you look at those bolts back there, that we're on the top 4th hole. So if this wanted to lower down, you know, that's like almost a finger gap. So if that whole seat wanted to lower down some, we'd crash into the jack if this jack was any more outboard towards the passenger side there. Another thing we wanted to really bank on was the opportunity to get like a lot of symmetry and design. If you start looking again, like I really always stress looking at the design of what's already on the car or just what you've already been building. And you start looking at like some of the radiuses here, right? And then some of the stuff we've been putting in. And you start to apply that into what you're building. So like these are our upper mounts for this thing. And this is the machine portion that comes from AGM or Geiser Brothers, and then all this stuff we've adapted in. And these were built off the car. They were welded on the table, and then they're just root passed in right now. But you can see they're completely boxed. So this is like your centerpiece in the car. I knew this was going to be a big visual cue here in between the driver and the passenger. And it made sense for us to get something that also added as like a structural support. So we didn't want to go too far onto this top roof tube, but I wanted to just be able to tie into that junction there. So you can see where these kind of bond into the upper portion, they're all tied in. They grab all of these front tubes, these 1, 2, 3, and the 4, 5, 6, including the vertical down tube here on the B-pillar. So like I said, all this stuff was welded on the table and then glued into the car, just root pass style. While I'm in here, I do want to talk about the intake and the structure for it. I know we talked about it last time where we wanted it to pull out, be serviceable, be something that can be changed very easily. You don't want to remove panels. And I wanted to also have that intake not sealed where it's living in the trans and engine sheet metal bay of air and the temperature there. So getting as much cooling and fresh air to this intake was important. And that's what we have here. So you can see I've started some rough design on this center stack. This is where all the Motec stuff will be. Displays, PDMs, same thing per passenger here. And what you see under, this is our intake tube. I wish I could kind of take this stuff off, but it's so locked in for building right now I can't. And then what you can also see is like this holster. So this whole portion, it is on quick, like these Zeus buttons will stay here. If you had to take this off, they're not gonna fall out. They're like self-retaining Zeus buttons, but really if you just loosen the T-bar clamp over here, this whole filter will just slide out of this register here, and you can just pop it up and out, and this whole thing is completely serviceable. I really wanted to get a long run of channel in here too, and what that does is that also, any heat coming off the engine that's moving rearward, it doesn't go onto the intake tube. So we're trying to get as much cool or cooler air as possible on that area. So I'm gonna show you guys this, but really what we wanna do is build this thing out first and have that as like your primary panel that stays on. And then this is your service panel. This service panel is for getting the trans, for getting to the back of the engine, This is a service panel as well, but this really wanted to be your number one per side. It really opens up to everything you need back there. You can also get into the throttle body. And the other thing to note too is on that intake, there is your mass airflow sensor and your bung there. And that's gonna be serviceable. Once we trim this up to where it has to be, then that'll be something you can swap out without having to take anything off. So this wanted to be a panel that it absolutely needed to be able to come off with the seats in here. It needed to be able to come off with, even if you had a tool bag, maybe the tool bag doesn't even have to come out. So that's what we have. It's just a very simple panel. You can access everything you need to. And then just for shits and giggles here, the other thing to think about too is even when you're building this stuff, like think about where you can get your Zeus tool, like your quarter turn. I like the hex. And it enables for a better tooling instead of using like that flathead style quarter turn fastener. But thinking about where, like making sure you can actually access the buttons is a thing too. So see, once these are off, get to whatever you need. Fully wide open. It's the same exact thing on each side. The passenger side actually is even more vast because the throttle control is not on the passenger side. So that whole panel itself just comes right off. Okay, so I am going to jump around on this thing, and I mean that just geographically on the car. Like I'm not going to be able, like I want to showcase the rest of the jack mount here that's lower, but really it's about the ergonomics and efficiency of me getting in and out and jumping around to different spots. Since I'm sitting in here, it's the same thing with like building this whole thing. It's absolutely time and labor intensive getting in and out of here because there's so much chassis. So building any of like our intake here, any of this stuff, I'm climbing in and out of this thing. I might be climbing in and out of the chassis 200 or 250 times a day. And that's just a realistic thing, if you need to make fine adjustments. Now what that does is that also helps you if you start thinking about efficiency. How many pieces of information can I take every time I get into this thing? How many things, whatever I'm working on, how many bits of information can I take down? So then every time I get in and out, I can make that many adjustments instead of just, adjust one thing and then pop out and do that and then pop in. That's where you start driving yourself crazy. So it really teaches you a lesson in efficiency. That being said, I want to kind of go over our pod situation, or at least our display cowls is really what you'd want to call them. The driver's side is where we're at now. Obviously you can see the GPS hiding under here. You can see the steering shaft. And you can see the passenger side is also hanging out. There is an extreme amount of stuff in here to find symmetry, to make sure that each side is exactly the same as the other. All the shapes are the same. And this is a Everson chassis. Andy constructed this thing. It's perfect per side for the most part, but perfect enough for me to be able to cut pieces and do duplicates and just build a left and a right on everything. And thank goodness that I can do that because it makes life so much easier. So something to think about here. This is like these shapes, and why we have so much going on is not only to ensure everything's going to be perfect, but it's also because this display cowl, this isn't just a little pod. This is part of the aero. This is all part of shapes that draw to the front of the car that it will show you. But it's like to do, to find one thing, you have to like get information with everything else. That's the kind of situation we're in here. So like this is where our electronics are going to go. Our Motec will be here. We'll have our display here, and then we'll have PDM touchpads on the lower portion. The passenger will have the same thing. Really, that's all like roughed in, but I couldn't move forward anymore on this until we started to figure out the hoods. These hoods also, like these shapes, these are compound shapes. They are not just a symmetrical arch, but they are something that has a peak about 2/3 in. That's the highest point, and it dips off gradually, and then it tightens, and it brings tension to the outside. And then you flip that, and you do that on the passenger over there. So it's just a lot. The other thing to see is like the shape here, it also comes out. So there's no like just flat, basic, like generic shapes in here. It's not just parallel lines and square. This is not like a Minecraft style dash, it's got organic shape to it, and it's the same thing with what we're doing like on everything else. There's a fine line between just like brakes and straight and angular stuff, and then running dynamic like organic radius shapes. So you can see like there's a lot of work into these bills. You can see that top seam there. There's some pretty good fitment on this thing. And it's the same for over here. So with that being said, like this, even this face plate, this is going to go away. This is just something that's holding my shape. And once we have all of this dialed in, the last thing I'll do is I'm going to cut all this face plate out, because we really just have like a brim, if you will, or like a hood over the displays. We don't, like all of under this hood, all this will be open. Like you'll see all the controls and you'll see all the chassis. You'll see like the brake control valves here, or the cutoffs. You know, same over there. The GPS will just be there, and then there'll be kind of a spatial void that'll go back behind there, a depth. And these are just almost, you know, just a hood. So that stuff will go away, but really like this information here, you got to get so much more of that outer information, because everything is tied in, and that's how it is with a lot of good design and stuff that's thought through. You don't want to just build a section and then add another section. You need to think about, you know, 4 sections in, how that stuff is all going to tie together, so it doesn't look like you just stacked shit. And that's where we're at with this. So I wanted to be in here and show you guys some of this. Something else to think about, like the Clarkes, right? Like I have these as placeholders, but I also have to think about where that makes sense. You know, like this panel also comes off. I don't want to infringe on that. I want to know what the quarter turn fasteners are going to look like, you know, like, because there's a sense of design in that. You don't want to just have Zeus buttons scattered throughout where they just look like freckles. You want to try to find symmetry in things where it makes sense. And that doesn't have to mean symmetry where it's all perfect spacing. You have to do it in a way where it makes sense. Sometimes it could be foreshadowed where maybe that spacing goes tight and it starts going long. There's lots of exercises to really test and challenge design. So this whole portion, this is actually 1 piece, 2 piece, 3 piece, all blended, you know, welded on the backside, and then all blended to make it look as one. But this whole portion and this trough here, this kind of lives in the car. You'd have to take the filter off and the intake tube to really, and even the upper display pod to get this thing out of the car. And it's within reason, because it really doesn't need to leave. It's not a priority panel that needs to be on and off for service. Current progress right now for myself. Well, let's just pop this in. So pressure, we talked about the ID Designs pressure relief valve for the steering. That's in here. It's on bungs, like some welded bungs. Really easy way to mount stuff into like a bulkhead. All this stuff is pretty much the same as we talked about last time. A lot of this flat panel work is going to start turning, and I call flat panel work like stuff where it's not extreme shapes, it's just kind of covering the chassis and closing the chassis. And what we're going to end up doing is, once Colin's kind of got his meat and potato done of like all the tabbing and hard parts of the chassis, any of the welded bracketry, all that stuff, then I'm going to start putting Colin on panel work with me. What does that look like? That looks like I'll probably go and I'll start from the back, and I'll lay out all the Zeus button locations, like how I'd like them to span, and then I'll have him rough out the panels. And then I'll go back and I'll do a bead roll design in there, and then I'll have him step all the panels in like we do, and he's really good at that. The one thing that's just, it's the hardest thing to teach, and we're working on it, is design. Like you can totally do stuff super generic, but that's what you get. You get a generic result. If you just go, hey, I'm just gonna do a 2-inch radius and on all the bead rolls, then that's what you get for the rest of your life. You know, you have to take educated risks and work on going different levels, and that's why pushing design is so important, but it's also one of the hardest things to teach. Teaching fabrication and helping my guys learn the fundamentals of building things, it doesn't hold a candle to just, is it a candle? Or a torch? Or a flame too. Or a flame? Man, you know what I used to do? My mom used to say all the phrases backwards, and I still do like that, right? And my mom thought it was so cute So she's like, why would I change this? This is awesome. I'm just going to let this guy just develop these things. And it never changed. And now here, look at me. I'm a couple skips away from 40 and I'm still saying weird stuff. I want to get Colin on that stuff, but again, what I was pressing on is design. I think that you can either really study how to teach design, or you just kind of treat it like a language, a foreign language. And if your guys are all in the shop and they're all seeing stuff and building stuff a certain way, and you just keep doing template after template, and they're starting to recognize those shapes, and you tell them, hey, I did a bigger radius here, and I drew a contour instead of a radius through here, and this actually we want to tighten because it should complement the shape that's, you want to accentuate what you're doing in those steps. So then that design language is starting to translate and trickle into their own brains. And that's where we're at. I know, sick tangent. But on that note, wanted to cover that, and then we go here, and this is the big stuff. This is where this thing is going to start changing. This truck is going to look like nothing else. Like it or hate it, whatever. But this is where we start getting into big moves with the sheet metal and the aero work and the flow. And that's kind of what you see here. One thing that looks really crazy is the height of the cowls here, or the hoods. This flat bar here, another thing for building, if what will always help you is get a lot of flat stock, thicker flat stock, 3/8 or 1/2 inch, and that provides a really nice surface for you to clamp through cars and kind of build to or have as a line of sight. These hoods or the cowls are that height. I think we talked about the sight line last time, and I even showed you sketches as far as that string we had that was kind of telling the story of where we needed to be, and that's what this is. So when you sit in that seat, the information that you get from the bottom of this to the top of this is all you need, and that's all you need to see your front wheels, to see your clip, to see everything. So it's as much as like, oh my God, you can't see. That's not true. You can see everything you need to moving at 0 miles per hour, from your front end. Now maybe you can't see what's under here, or maybe you can't see like on your hood or something, but you can see everything to get this thing in a track and in any condition, any speed. So that kind of sets up the profile there. What'll be really nice is that's helping create less of a drag angle here. So with all of this transitioning up, that's just closing this gap. So there's not a big void where it's just a slot of air that just goes in and then just twirls around and gets fucked up by people and seats and everything else. We wanted to narrow that turret down and have it just be like a little gunship turret instead of a big void. So if that makes sense, I'm glad. If it doesn't, my apologies. That's what sets the tone for this. Drawing this whole thing out to the bulkhead was the next thing. And where I'm at now, and what you'll be able to look forward to for the next update, is to have, there has to be a separation. This whole thing can't just be one pod. So what we're having here is, this is going to be extraction. And what I mean by extraction is it'll be like a shark gill or a slat through here, angled just where they need to be. And those will be directionally exiting air. So everything coming through there, through that portion in the middle of the chassis, and everything coming through the middle here will all exit out. And it won't exit through there, but it'll kind of exit up. With that, there still needs to be a closeout for the display cowls. It still needs to be something where that is sealed from the elements and all the electronics, and stuff's not just going into the cabin compartment. So right now, that's like my process is I can't just build this, because everything needs to be streamlined. Everything needs to be dynamic and tensioned properly. And then I need to separate these two and build two different parts. So I'll build our display hoods or cowls. I don't know when I'm going to figure out a proper term for those where I just stick to one. And then we'll have this other portion here where these slats and part of that arrow is also removable. So it's two different portions. Something to think about. You never look at what it dropped, you look at where it's making a noise, so then you know where you find it. Insert 10 millimeter joke. So these portions here, the driver and the passenger will be higher. The profile that you see, like this profile here, and this is a rough profile, but that's gonna be what you get. That's all gonna be seamless, streamlined, and like I said, there'll be big ass louvers or slats in here. Deep, gnarly, long things like shark gills, like a great white. The middle portion here, this will have tin work. There'll be a sealed kind of portion in here that'll get air to the power steering cooler, and then there'll be more excess air kind of tunneled through into the engine. And this, like if you see where the center stack is here, the display stack, this is probably 3.5 inches lower than the portions here on the sides. So that's all gonna start to do the same thing, but it's really gonna kind of draw, it's almost here. So it's almost gonna kind of draw through here. If you can see that, that would all still be visible. And then our shape would kind of draw and still start here, but it would be on a different contour that would lend to the middle shape where it's almost a drop down. It's like the opposite of a cowl hood where the cowl kind of comes up in the middle. This would be cowls on the sides and then would channel in, and this will channel air through that middle portion. We said, oh, we don't want the air going through, totally, but our coolers will be back there, and this is just our one little slip of air to be channeled. There will be extraction through here too, meaning slats or gills, and those will have some kind of stainless mesh. So if rocks come up, debris comes up, it's not just dropping straight into the engine and then going into the trans and all that shit. So we'll have some kind of extraction here, and then there'll be a panel right over all of the accessories in the belt where that panel will need to come off by itself. It'll need to be the primary panel, kind of like what we talked about with the trans, and the area by the footwell in there, where this panel needs to come off before everything else. As far as the fiberglass goes, we are cutting all of the fiberglass except the sides. So this thing will not have a one piece anymore. It will have two fenders. We're not going to modify the one piece, so it's a Mason body. We'll still be able to buy the Mason front clip, and then we're literally just going to have like a nice tight layout of cut line on that. So when you replace it, because that is a consumable on a race truck, when you replace that, you're just going to cut it, and then you're going to put that one on, and then you'll put this one on. But like from this perimeter outward will be the glass, and it'll run right into our louver portion here, right? So it's a good reference point, if you can see it, Joey, that this area here, that's where the glass starts. That's where your hood starts. So really, like, this looks all huge and robust, but it's really, when you think about it, it's gonna disappear. It's gonna disappear right about here. You're gonna have about 1.5 inches to the top of this thing, and then it's gonna taper tight, and it's gonna go away. So we're gonna just cut it out, but it's really not gonna look as crazy as it might look right now. Now, something to think about this, just like if you go back and you watch some of the process with building the back half on the exotic, there was an extreme amount of me going, man, this is uncomfortable. I know, like, I have to trust the process here. I know that this is a shape where it looks weird, but I know that in the end, my original intention is going to equal the end result, where it's going to be this beautiful thing that we planned. And that's the same with this. This is uncomfortable and it's different, but once it's done, it will render a functional purpose that makes sense for what we're doing. And on top of that, the tin work that we do out the back, which is going to drag off the roof line and out towards the spares, almost like an SUV, is going to complement all this. So when you look at it from a side profile, it's going to be absolute shooting brake. Look it up. I think it's so important to show process instead of just show the monkey like shiny at the end. There is so much built into thought and design process with this stuff where it's almost more important that we show the steps here and the how-tos. In my whole life, that's how it's been. Having process books, you know, showing process on Instagram, it's always been something about showing not just where you got, but the trail to how you got there, instead of just some shiny shit. Something to note here too is, like, look at how much more the body adds. So when this side panel's on, like, you know, even when you look at the deck height of the top of the hood here, you know, that might be 5.5 inches, and it tapers. So it doesn't look as profound and robust when the body's on. And for the most part, the body will be on. It's not really, I don't think it's gonna go race. You know, by accident, this body panel might come off. I mean, for sure, these things are consumables, but this is the last one you lose usually. So you can kind of count on these shapes. And that's the same thing it's all built to. So it's like that's why I have this here. It's just to kind of, I set it down and then I put it back on and I kind of look at every step of the way of where we're going and our constraints and proportions. Something else we talked about on the list was the fill area for the reservoir. So the AGM jacks have a, just a typical kind of hydraulic pump with a reservoir tank. The reservoir tank's custom, it's fitted to the chassis. That's something we already talked about last update, but we were waiting on the cap. So Geyser Brother makes a pretty nice cap here that comes with a bung, and then we just have like an extended portion. Obviously put some good design into that thing. But that's just another thing we had to wrap up. All the welding's done on here. And the rest of the welding, we actually need to pop the fuel cell out to get to. That's not a huge issue. I think what we should do is climb under there and look at what's going down with the lower mount for the AGM jacks. This should give us some pretty decent symmetry vibes here. Should also really show you some packaging. So you can see kind of our Mars landing pads here. Then you can see what we got going on here. So you can see how tall the AGM jacks are. You can also see, where they're mounted, how that makes sense. Everything just having a home, everything having symmetry. The AC blowers, the intake's still not getting blocked by anything. And then, you can see where the filter here has its home too. And you can see all of the airflow that can come from under the filter, and anything that comes down and lands in there, the gravel or any kind of rock splash, that can all just exit out the back. Obviously there'll be some coolers blocking things back here, but for the most part, this is your main stuff that's going in here before the coolers. So there's a couple things to look at here. One of the biggest things was these saddles. These are all constructed out of 250 wall axle tube. It just made sense to there's like a stepped collar on these jacks where there's a step on the bottom, so it doesn't want to let these things go up anymore. And instead of grabbing this tube, it makes sense to grab right on this machine portion on the bottom. This is all integrated in the chassis. It also doubles as a gusset, right? So we're picking up on 1 tube, 2 tube, 3 tube, 4 tube, all through here. And then this whole portion comes off. The jack itself goes up into the female pocket up there, and then it goes back into this saddle, and then you clamp it, boom, saddle. All of this is root passed. Obviously this is all finaled. And then what we have down here, so you'll see another structure, and this structure is to keep these bottom rings or these plates from not wobbling around. So these dishes, they kind of have a spherical, oh boy, I want to just keep that one. they have a spherical bearing. Oh, that one gets me, dude. That's where I know I'm different. They have a spherical bearing on the bottom, like a rod end, uniball, whatever. So if you didn't have something to stabilize them, like this plate has in this ring, they would just flop around. And then you got to think, not only that, if they hung down, they would get caught up on something. So these pieces we have here, they tie into original mounting location holes here, and then they just bolt in, and they keep that thing under tension all the time. So when it goes out, it'll adjust itself to the terrain, and then when it goes back in, it'll go shh and sit right back into that thing. So it's kind of a cool feature. These were another thing that was also like not an intimidating thing, but just something overwhelming because it was unfamiliar territory. So mounting these jacks it seemed like a lot bigger of a deal than it was, and then accomplishing it just, you look back and you're like, what was the problem here? So something else to note, small detail, is the water line. So this angle and this opening here, this is built for the water lines to get through. Just a smidgen, you probably need to put like silicone hose around them just so they don't chafe around. But this is Your actual water lines for the radiator will come on each side of this, and then they'll go out, they'll run the tube, and then they'll go to our radiator. Our radiators are still being built at PWR, so we'll keep you posted on that. Cool. Okay, cool. Yoshi mufflers. We'll call them something cool though. I hope those come to fruition. Now, there's only so much. I hate saying this cop out because it's, oh, I don't have enough time to do that, or there's only so much time in the day. I think that's fucking bullshit. But prioritizing things and getting things done, like there's a lot of digital design required. Thomas's truck, the Chevelle, this thing, like it just, the Bronco, all of it, and Evelyn. They all require a lot of hands-on digital drawing from myself, and it's not stuff I can have other people do. It's not something I can just pass on or sign off on. It's really intensive because that initial design, that original intention has to equal the end result. And it's the same with those mufflers. I want to get that going, but it's a matter of just really sitting down, putting the efforts into it, and then that's the hard part. And then everybody else can just, we green light that thing and everybody can do what they need to do to get them done. So we'll see about that. 7 out of 10, that's going to happen. Cool. Pods we talked about, or cowls, or displays, or hoods, or brims. Rear tin work, flat panel work, extraction slats, James Lynn wiring, overhead console. Those are 2 things I forgot. That's why I need these. There will be, so on that middle roof radius tube, going from the B pillar to the A pillar, there will be a overhead console. That will have radio faceplate, intercom, want to say suppression poles on that thing. So just, I'd have to check my notes. Kevin and I have like a notes going on our phone. It's a shared one, so you can update it. It's a really good thing if you have like a build going on with someone, you can set up what you need to work on. Joey's done it with me and I've just botched it before, but you can do it for anything where you share notes with each other. You can update them, you can review them, blah, blah, blah. They call it technology. That upper console needs to be pretty roughed in for James Lynn to come. James Lynn is who's doing all the wiring on here. This will have the best Motec package you can get for a race vehicle. That being said, he's gonna come and like pre-run some of the wiring harness in about a week. And I need to have something up there at least that's tight. It's not like we're going to make a harness where it's going to have loops in it to move the stuff around. It's going to be tailored to the car. So that's something. I think what to expect next, I'm going to keep pressing. So like I said, I'm on sheet metal with this thing until it's done. Every single week, that's what we're doing. Frontier is on the weekends for me. It's just, that's the grind right now, and I'm totally okay with it, and I'm absolutely grateful for it. So I think you can see all the front portions and the extraction areas, slats, all that stuff complete. That's something we want to go for. And then what you'll see is finished exhaust, at least up to this portion. So we're almost there. All the clamps, all the nut and bolt holders. That's, I don't know what to call them. Just, instead of springs. So that done. And then I think we'll just start flat panels, like all this portion of the chassis here. These are like the easy ones. Like these are like the bread, bread and butter, meat and potato style panels. Just figuring out like nice clean layout for Zeus buttons. That's where you really get wins. If you just start going, grab the corner, grab that corner, like that's doesn't work. So figuring out where all the Zeus buttons need to go, figuring out what panels need to be prioritized so we're not doing like overlaps where you need to pull one off to get to another one that's more important. That's all stuff to think about, especially with a race vehicle. And then bringing a lot of this, like this panel work's gonna go up. This will have big drawn out aero and sheet metal work. So off of the roof here, we'll be having like almost like an SUV vibe, but custom, almost like a Gordini, if you will. Old Riviera Riviera trophy truck, like post truck. So I guess you could call that a Robbie Gordon truck too. that will all complement like what's going on in the front. So it's stuff to think about. Now, I don't think that's going to be done until last, but at least what we talked about will be like our next update. So thank you guys. I hope you're enjoying this thing. It's been great. Kevin and Chris are like, again, I get a lot from my relationships with clients, and Kevin and Chris, it was just meant to be. Chris actually went to a CDU school. I don't know if any of you guys watching have any experience with a CDU school or emotional growth boarding schools, but I got sent away when I was 17. In the middle of the night, my mom just thought I needed to get, I needed to go somewhere where I wasn't going to lose control of my life. And I went to a CDU school called Northwest Academy. And I got so much from that, and it opened my eyes to so much. And Chris, who's part of this thing, he actually went to a CDU school too. And to find guys that have is so, so rare. So there's a lot of things that line up when you're doing your part. Things start to hit on a frequency. A frequency is what you frequently see. And that's what we're doing. So I hope you guys are enjoying this. I hope you're enjoying everything. Like, comment, subscribe, share the page. We're just going to keep going. Bye.